In 1957, on the practice field at Florida State, Burt Reynolds went down and never returned to football again. That knee injury closed the path he had prepared for throughout his youth. Professional competition, a clear future, a definition of himself. Everything stopped in a single moment. No more field, no more plans. Only a void and a body forced to begin again. Years later, America would remember him by a completely different image. The thick mustache, the half smile, the unhurried stride of a man who always seemed in control of any situation. On screen, failure rarely touched him. Between that first fall and the lights of Hollywood lay a journey that was anything but straight. And everything began with the moment he lost the path that had seemed preordained for him. And to understand where that journey truly began, one must go back much earlier, to before he ever stepped onto the field. Burt Reynolds was born on February 11th, 1936. He grew up in a family where discipline was more visible than emotional expression. His father, a police officer accustomed to order and command, brought strict standards into everyday life. In that environment, Reynolds learned to live by rules, by benchmarks, in an atmosphere with little praise and little overt affection, yet always with expectations that had to be met. He did not openly confront his father, but a distance lingered between them. Yet Reynolds came of age with the feeling that he had to prove his ability and endurance through concrete action. Recognition, if it came at all, was always accompanied by the need to try harder, to be stronger, to stand firm under pressure. That state repeated over many years, and gradually became the quiet force shaping how he chose the road ahead. Reynolds' teenage years were closely tied to sports. He entered football as a way to measure himself by clear criteria: speed, stamina, the ability to withstand impact. A college scholarship arrived as a natural result of that process. He played in a physically demanding position within a fiercely competitive environment where every effort was judged directly on the field. For a time, the road ahead appeared fairly clear. A professional sports career was a practical and attainable destination. The knee injury happened. There was no lengthy warning, no buffer to prepare, just a single moment, and the dream of becoming a professional athlete ended. Not a pause, not a delay, an ending. The path that had just opened closed completely, leaving behind a void not easily named. Not only the loss of a career, but the loss of a definition of himself. Before he had time to adapt to that reality, Reynolds faced another upheaval. A serious car accident left him badly injured, and with internal damage that required the removal of his spleen to save his life. This time, it was no longer the injury of an athlete, but a direct confrontation with the limits of survival. The body once considered the solid foundation of his future suddenly became fragile. 2 consecutive blows placed Reynolds in a harsh reality. Strength was no longer something he could automatically trust. Very early on, he experienced the feeling of his body not obeying his will. Later, and when he entered film and repeatedly performed dangerous stunts, traces of that feeling remained, like a quiet memory of the first time everything stopped beyond his control. After the knee injury, he was forced to give up college football. During this period, he attended Palm Beach Junior College, Florida. It was there that a teacher encouraged him to try participating in the school's theater productions as a way to find direction when sports was no longer viable. Reynolds quickly revealed an ability for expression and confidence in front of an audience. In 1956, he appeared in the play Outward Bound and won an acting award at the Florida State Drama Competition, one of the earliest recognitions of his ability in this field. That achievement opened opportunities for further study and access to a more professional acting training environment. The decision to change career paths did not stem from a long-nurtured artistic passion, and it took shape in the circumstance of a sports career closing completely, forcing him to find another way forward. Acting was a practical turn. From someone once preparing for a life in athletics to a field he had never imagined committing to long-term. From that point on, Reynolds became accustomed to moving forward without pausing too long to explain himself or seek sympathy. Stepping away from the theater stage, Burt Reynolds did not immediately enter film in a single leap. And he moved through television, slowly, steadily, and persistently, during a period when he himself was still trying to determine who he could become. In the late 1950s, American television was expanding at an unprecedented pace. A wave of new series emerged. Shooting schedules were dense, production rhythms were rapid, and young faces were placed into an almost continuous cycle of work. Reynolds arrived at precisely that moment, not as a star, but as someone willing to take the job, learn the craft, and survive in front of the camera. His first notable role came with Riverboat, 1959 to 1961, where he played Ben Fraser. The series aired nationwide on NBC, placing Reynolds regularly before millions of American viewers each week. There was no explosive, symbolic breakthrough, but that steady repetition created something more important. His face, his voice, his walk gradually became familiar. Recognition did not come from a single moment, but from the rhythm of consistent appearances. After Riverboat, Reynolds joined Gunsmoke in the role of Quint Asper and appeared in more than 50 episodes. At the time, Gunsmoke was one of the highest-rated series on American television, maintaining a prominent position in the rankings for many years. Reynolds' character was not a classic hero, nor entirely a villain. Rough-edged, sparing with words, inwardly complex, and distinctly Southern in bearing. From this point, a professional image began to take shape. A tough, a composed man with charisma who was not easily placed in a position of weakness. In 1966, Hawk placed Reynolds in a rare leading role outside the Western mold. He played John Hawk, a Native American detective operating in an urban environment, a character clearly experimental compared to his earlier roles. The series did not last long, however, due to insufficient viewership to sustain production. His first major leading role did not open the large transition that had been hoped for, but instead revealed another limit. He could stand at the center of the frame, yet not enough to alter his position within the industry. With Dan August, 1970 to 1971, Reynolds again became the central face of a detective series produced by Quinn Martin, the force behind many popular crime programs of that era. The show was heavily promoted, and Reynolds' image appeared frequently on posters and in network publicity campaigns. The program lasted only one season before being canceled. It was not a complete failure, but it did not generate a breakthrough either. After more than a decade of work, he remained in a position he had grown accustomed to, consistently present, reliable, but not yet crossing into the realm of cinema. Throughout that time, Reynolds worked almost continuously. Shooting schedules were heavy, production rhythms fast, preparation time limited, an environment that required actors to react quickly, maintain sustained energy, and complete scenes efficiently. He learned to restrain expression, to let characters emerge through action, and to survive within the demanding mechanics of television production. It was a practical school. No syllabus, no intermissions, only work repeated day after day. Yet that very stability also created a limit. The roles he received grew increasingly similar. Enter the scene, maintain a tough rhythm, complete the action sequence, restrain emotion, exit. In the next project, the cycle continued almost unchanged. On set, he was trusted for his efficiency and discipline. Off-screen, so audiences recognized him as a familiar masculine type. That recognition came with a fixed frame. Reynolds was seen as a kind of man before he was seen as an actor with wide range. His presence on television became increasingly visible, yet his position hardly shifted. He had steady employment, income, an audience, and the trust of producers, but he did not step into the territory of film. His name was familiar, yet not the first choice for major projects. From the late 1960s onward, a change began to take shape. Reynolds no longer confined himself to safe roles within the television cycle. He started seeking other opportunities, participating in smaller film projects, and accepting roles that did not guarantee his familiar image, choosing to leave the stable ground he had built over many years. It was not a loud decision, but a series of quiet choices, each carrying clear professional risk. In the course of that work, friction became more visible. Between the desire to change his mode of expression and the demand to preserve the image that had proven effective with audiences. Between completing assigned work well and the feeling of still standing in a familiar, yet unmoving place. Within that repetition, he began to see clearly the structure in which he stood. A professional, reliable actor with a firm place in television, and precisely because of that, kept there. There was no shortage of work, no shortage of presence, yet the road ahead did not automatically expand. For the first time, Reynolds began to accept the idea of a gamble. Not to destroy what he had built, but to seek a different position, a place where he would not only be a familiar television face, but could step into a larger space where nothing was guaranteed and no one yet knew how far he might go. By the late 1960s, Burt Reynolds had established a clear position on American television. He worked steadily, was widely recognized, and never lacked opportunities to appear. Now, yet when he stepped into film, that advantage did not automatically transfer. On the big screen, he was no longer the familiar face of television audiences, but simply an actor trying to assert himself within a system that already had firmly established names. His first film roles arrived within that context. Shark, 1969, Sam Whiskey, 1969, and several other action western projects made use of the masculine presence and physicality audiences already associated with him. And these films helped Reynolds maintain visibility, but they did not create a clear shift in status. They reached theaters, found viewers, generated acceptable box office returns, yet did not become cinematic events. Critics did not view this as a television actor redefining himself on the big screen, but merely as a continuation of an existing image. Within that process, professional tensions gradually surfaced. As he joined larger projects, Reynolds faced the reality that he was often seen as a popular leading man rather than a choice for psychologically complex characters. He had charisma, camera experience, and the ability to guarantee entertainment value, but he was not the priority when scripts demanded interior depth or artistic risk. The roles he received continued to revolve around familiar structures: the strong man, quick to react, decisive in action. He performed his work effectively, yet the evaluation stopped at professional efficiency. Reynolds understood this. Film did not lack roles. It lacked roles capable of changing the way an actor was perceived. The turning point came in 1972 with Deliverance, directed by John Boorman and adapted from James Dickey's novel. The story of four men on a canoe trip down a wild river quickly transforms into a brutal survival journey, and where belief in personal strength is placed under real pressure. This was not a conventional entertainment project. There was no familiar cowboy structure, no predictable action rhythm. The film focused on human limits, on the collapse of illusions about control. Reynolds played Lewis Medlock, a man who places absolute faith in physical strength and mastery over his environment. At the outset, Lewis aligns closely with the masculine image audiences already associated with Reynolds. And as the journey progresses, however, the character is forced to confront limits that personal conviction cannot overcome. In that space, the role opened a different dimension for him. Filming took place under harsh natural conditions. Many scenes were shot on location, including dangerous river sequences. Reynolds performed most of his own stunts. During a waterfall scene, he suffered a back injury, a physical consequence later remembered as part of the production's cost. The shot remained in the final film. The boundary between performance and physical experience therefore became blurred. Deliverance was produced on a budget of approximately $2 million and, upon release, earned more than $45 million at the North American box office. The film received 3 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, and quickly came to be regarded as an important work of early 1970s American cinema. For Reynolds, it was the first time his name was attached to a film taken seriously, both artistically and culturally. As Lewis Medlock, Reynolds did not rely solely on physical strength. His character moved from near absolute confidence to tension, caution, and silence in the face of crisis. That shift was not expressed through long speeches, but through posture, gaze, breathing, and restraint in movement. The image of the man who always controlled the situation gradually gave way to someone forced to recalibrate his own beliefs. The role did not deny his established masculinity, but placed it under genuine trial. After Deliverance, Burt Reynolds did not continue along a straight line. He did not enter the trajectory of an art house actor as many predicted, but drifted into a different position, one where cinema operated according to audience rhythm and popular appeal. There, he did not merely appear. He dominated. As the box office began to trust him, Hollywood began to trust only one version of him. In the early 1970s, that image stabilized quickly. The strong Southern man, confident, a slightly rebellious, able to laugh in the face of danger and unafraid of confrontation. Reynolds did not dismantle that structure. He sharpened it with each role. Every appearance carried a familiar energy. Direct action, light humor, quick reflexes, a rhythm that did not require audiences to wait long to understand where they stood within the story. The box office responded according to a clear pattern. If Reynolds was in the film, there would be an audience. Many of his movies were not promoted as artistic events, yet still achieved strong returns due to his presence. Viewers were not only following the plot, they were following the way he entered the frame, set the rhythm of the scene, and propelled the story forward with almost instinctive confidence. On posters, he stood at the center like an easily understood promise. Trailers revolved around that face and voice. Release schedules were built upon his personal draw. For nearly a decade, his name repeatedly appeared on lists of America's top box office stars. Not because of a single role, but because of the persistent repetition of an image the market had clearly identified. New projects were therefore constructed around the same promise. Action fast enough, humor close enough, as an ending that would not leave audiences walking out of the theater feeling burdened. The structure worked, and because it worked, it was multiplied. Each film became a variation of the same energy source, not identical but familiar enough for audiences to enter the theater with expectations already shaped. As his position changed, so did the pressure. It was no longer about finding opportunity, but about maintaining momentum. Every script choice was tied to a number that had to be met, so a release strategy behind it. A chain of projects dependent on present success. A single underperforming film was not merely an isolated setback, but could trigger larger adjustments. Reynolds continued accepting roles that preserved the energy proven effective, direct, lively, threaded with humor amid danger. The pace of work remained intense, shooting schedules dense, decisions made quickly. Not because he failed to see other possibilities, but because the orbit formed around his name operated according to its own logic. For nearly a decade, that machine kept turning. Reynolds stood at its center, keeping the promise audiences had grown accustomed to trusting, while Hollywood increasingly understood exactly where it wanted him positioned within the larger picture of the American box office. In the early 1980s, Burt Reynolds continued to appear regularly on the big screen. His name still stood at the center of posters, still served as the anchor for the promotion of action entertainment projects. His films reached theaters in a familiar rhythm: chases, collisions, confrontations, laughter woven between dangerous scenes. Audiences still came. Box office numbers remained stable, yet the gaps between major successes began to widen. The figures no longer surged as they had before. Burt Reynolds still had roles, still had an audience, but the results were no longer automatic. Reynolds continued accepting roles that demanded strong physical presence and high energy on screen. And many action sequences were performed personally rather than entirely handed over to stunt doubles, and the pace of work was sustained at intense levels over long periods. During the production of several projects, he suffered serious injuries, required extended treatment, and became dependent on pain medication in order to continue working. Those injuries did not appear on screen, yet they followed him from one film to the next. His roles continued to revolve around a familiar image: the confident man, quick in reflex, confronting danger head-on. This construction had once delivered clear box office results and continued to be repeated across multiple projects. During those years, new action faces emerged on the big screen. Film pacing accelerated, confrontations intensified, and the structure of the hero was shaped differently than before. Burt Reynolds still received roles, and still maintained his familiar performance style, still entered the frame with the presence that had built his name. Some films retained audiences, others left theaters earlier than expected. He continued working at high intensity, occupying central positions in many projects, performing action scenes in the way he knew best. Previous injuries did not disappear. They accompanied him through filming, through promotional tours, through daily life. On screen, and the image of the action star remained intact. Off-screen, his body began to show clearer limits. His name was still large enough to launch a project, yet each film now had to prove its own appeal. In the early 1990s, Burt Reynolds returned to television in a more stable and long-term role with the series Evening Shade. The show was set in a small Arkansas town where he portrayed Wood Newton, a former professional football player returning home to become a high school coach. And the character did not rely on speed or physical collision, but existed within daily rhythms: family, community, situations both humorous and touching upon the pride of a man who had passed his peak. This time, television was no longer a starting point as it had been in the late 1950s. He entered as a star with decades of film experience. The steady rhythm of a series allowed the character to develop episode by episode without depending on large-scale action scenes or relentless climactic structures. Reynolds played Wood Newton with restraint. A gaze held longer, silences left intact, small reactions placed precisely. The humor was not loud, but emerged from the character's adjustments to change. In 1991, Reynolds won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series, followed by a Golden Globe for the same role. These were clear professional recognitions, not tied to box office numbers, but to performance within a long-term structure. The awards did not alter the past, but they repositioned how his abilities were viewed in a context different from action cinema. Evening Shade ran for 4 seasons, providing Reynolds with a stable professional space after many turbulent years. He no longer had to prove himself through stunts or high-intensity masculine roles. His character existed through balance, experience, humor, and a touch of self-awareness. Recognition during this period came from his ability to sustain performance over time, not from the image that had once dominated the box office, but from his capacity to adjust and control a character within a different environment. By the mid-1990s, Burt Reynolds' professional rhythm changed in ways that were no longer easily reversible. The number of films gradually decreased, not because he withdrew, but because projects no longer produced the same impact. A name that once opened the box office was no longer an automatic guarantee. Roles still arrived, but the distance between the period of dominance and the new reality became evident in the market's response. At the same time, decisions off-screen began to create pressure. Reynolds invested in multiple business ventures, including a chain of restaurants and certain production activities, yet the outcomes did not meet expectations. Revenue was unstable, maintenance costs high, loans accumulated. Financial pressure ceased to be a private matter and gradually became a public reality. In 1996, he filed for bankruptcy protection. This was not a loud collapse, but a mandatory halt after a series of choices that had not produced results. The event shifted public perception, from a star once associated with box office success to a man restructuring his life. The invincible image of earlier years no longer aligned with present reality, and Reynolds entered a period of rebuilding his place in the industry from a different foundation. During that time, he continued working, yet each role carried added weight. There was no longer assurance from past fame, no longer distance between the person and what the public knew. Every choice was tied to a simple question: how to continue existing within the industry when one's position had changed. In 1997, Burt Reynolds agreed to appear in Boogie Nights, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, playing Jack Horner, a pornographic film director in the 1970s, trying to preserve a sense of cinema within an industry that was rapidly changing. The character did not carry the familiar structure of his earlier action masculine image. He appeared calm, observant, at times weary, at times striving to maintain dignity within an environment slipping from his grasp. The role did not rely on physical strength or speed. It existed through measured speech, sustained glances, and the contradiction between outward authority and inner solitude. Reynolds did not attempt to distance himself from the character. He allowed Jack Horner to emerge as a man moving through a period of declining influence, attempting to preserve order in a world no longer operating by old rules. The film received strong critical attention, and Reynolds' performance became one of its most frequently discussed elements. He won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor and received an Academy Award nomination in the same category. This was one of the rare moments in his film career when his acting ability stood at the center of professional discussion, detached from box office performance or star image. Boogie Nights did not erase the difficult years that preceded it. It did, however, reposition perspective. Reynolds was not only the face of a box office era, but an actor capable of inhabiting layered, complex characters without relying on familiar imagery. The recognition this time came from the way he sustained the character's rhythm, restrained, grounded, unshowy, in a film that demanded patience and depth. In 2017, he appeared in The Last Movie Star, a film that clearly reflected the road he had traveled. The central character was an aging actor once famous, confronting memory and the distance between past and present. Reynolds did not need excessive performance to create emotion. The way he appeared, the way he sat quietly, the way he looked back at old images, was enough to evoke the entire journey. During his final 2 decades, Reynolds no longer dominated the box office. There were no ranking lists, no promotional campaigns revolving around his name. Yet he continued to work, steadily, quietly, enduringly. His presence no longer lay in leading the market, but in continuing to appear in cinema as part of a history still being sustained. The relationships in Burt Reynolds' life were not separate from his career, yet they did not dissolve into its spotlight either. They unfolded alongside his professional rises and falls, and over time became the clearest reflection of the man behind the indomitable masculine image the public was accustomed to seeing. Burt Reynolds met Judy Carne in the early 1960s, during a period when both were working within American television. Judy Carne was a British actress building her career in the United States through stage and television roles. Their acquaintance formed amid dense working rhythms, and when projects followed one another, and personal relationships often began within professional spaces. In 1963, they married, at a time when Reynolds had not yet secured a stable position in the industry, and his professional future remained uncertain. Their shared life unfolded alongside constant work schedules, relocations for projects, and the pressure to sustain careers within a competitive environment. The relationship ended after only a few years in the mid-1960s. There was no major uproar, no prolonged media spectacle. Yet the experience marked a clear milestone in Reynolds' life. His first step into family life while still searching for professional footing, and his first acceptance that he could not sustain a long-term relationship amid an unstable career rhythm and unfinished personal growth. Not long afterward, the Burt Reynolds' name began appearing more frequently in the press when he entered into a relationship with Dinah Shore. The age difference, public stature, and media attention turned the relationship into a continuously discussed topic. They appeared together, were scrutinized, commented upon, and had almost no privacy. It was the first time Reynolds experienced the sense that his romantic life no longer belonged solely to him, but had become part of a public narrative. When the relationship ended, its after effect lay not in scandal, but in his realization that fame could distort what were originally deeply personal matters. Sally Field entered Burt Reynolds' life in the late 1970s when both were involved in film projects and working closely within an environment where the pressure of success was constant. Field at the time had established herself as an actress of depth, while Reynolds was at the height of box office appeal. Their connection formed within that working rhythm. Long shooting days, promotional tours, periods of reliance on one another to maintain balance amid the dense machinery of American cinema. Their relationship lasted many years, not stable according to traditional structures, yet durable enough to become an important part of Reynolds' private life. They shared not only fame, but also pressure, differences in professional philosophy, in career direction, in how to confront public scrutiny. Field leaned toward acting depth. Reynolds existed within the orbit of popular appeal and star status. That divergence created tension at times, yet it also kept them together for a long period. There was no sudden ending. They drifted apart gradually, following the rhythm of changing work and personal choices. Reynolds continued within the machinery of commercial cinema. Field moved further into psychologically rich roles. The difference that had existed from the beginning eventually became a real distance. Many years later, when looking back on his life in his final interviews, Reynolds spoke of Sally Field in a tone distinctly different from the one he used for his previous relationships. He did not say much, did not offer long explanations, only acknowledged that she was the woman he loved most in his life. That statement came late, after both had moved along their separate trajectories. Yet it was enough to show that Field's place was not confined to a single period, but existed in a deeper space within his memory and emotions. What remained after that bond was not a void easily named, but the feeling of something once profoundly real that could not be reclaimed. Reynolds continued forward, carrying with him fame, work, and the things he had not managed to hold on to. His private life shifted into a different rhythm, more practical, more direct in building a stable home, while his career still stood at the center of the spotlight. In 1988, at the height of his fame and still one of the most familiar faces at the American box office, Burt Reynolds became involved with Lonnie Anderson. At that time, Lonnie was also a prominent television star, widely known for the series WKRP in Cincinnati. They met when both were accustomed to the spotlight and media attention, and their relationship quickly became a subject followed by the public. By then, Reynolds had spent nearly 2 decades at the center of Hollywood. His career was solid, and his name strong enough to anchor projects. His image clearly defined in the eyes of audiences. His relationship with Lonnie unfolded when he was no longer searching for footing, but had already secured his position and sought to build a more stable family life amid an intense professional rhythm. They began their life together and later adopted their son, Quentin. In the early years, their image appeared before the public as that of a successful couple. 2 famous stars, each with their own careers, a family, a structure that seemed balanced. On the surface, everything functioned smoothly. Beneath it, the pressure of fame and relentless work schedules remained, seeping into daily life in ways difficult to separate. Amid demanding professional years and private fractures, Quentin entered Burt Reynolds' life quietly. Not on red carpets, not in interviews, but within small spaces. The living room, family dinners, moments sitting beside one another without needing many words. There were no audiences there, no image to maintain. Only a father and a growing child. He once said he wanted to be different from his own father, to be closer, to speak more, not to let strictness create distance. This was not expressed through grand declarations, but through being present when needed, through slowing down amid work schedules, through priorities few people saw. There were mornings driving his son to school, afternoons waiting outside practice fields, conversations recorded nowhere but in the memory of the 2 of them. The relationships that passed through his life did not arrange themselves into a neat order. Some bonds ran very deep, yet did not remain. Some words were left unsaid when everything had already moved away. Some names, when mentioned, still caused him to pause for a moment. They did not disappear. They simply receded, existing as fragments of memory whose value he sometimes fully understood only when it was too late. On screen, he maintained his familiar bearing, confident, quick, able to step out of danger with a half smile. In life, evenings grew longer, rooms quieter. There were silences between 2 people once very close, decisions made without any single moment that could clearly be called an ending. What remains after that journey does not lie in a specific role or a singular peak period, but in the way Burt Reynolds existed on screen for decades. He entered the frame with a distinct presence, approachable, natural, without distance, and allowing viewers to feel they were witnessing a person living within those circumstances rather than merely a constructed character. The image of a strong man who could laugh in the face of danger, confident yet connected to ordinary life, gradually became a familiar standard in American cinema for many years. Audiences remembered not only the films, but the feeling when he appeared. The rhythm quickened. The space felt more alive, the story easier to connect with. That influence required no declaration to be acknowledged. It often appeared in smaller moments, a signature written more slowly on an old photograph, and an unexpected question he asked someone as if wanting to know how they had continued living after the film ended. In later periods, when the spotlight was no longer as intense, he continued to work. Smaller roles, brief appearances, projects no longer at the center of the market. What remained visible was not his position on box office rankings, but the habit of commitment to work that had accompanied him since the beginning. In the memory of many viewers, that image remains. A man stepping into the frame with a half-smile, unforced confidence, and the sense that what was unfolding before them was real. No grand proclamation required, only presence sustained long enough to become a familiar part of American cinema across an extended era. His public appearances grew less frequent. There were no more red carpets, no more dense promotional schedules, only small gatherings, a few rows of chairs, photographs brought forward for signing. And he lingered longer between two fans, sometimes pausing in the middle of an old story as if searching for a detail that had drifted away. Once, when asked about a role from decades earlier, he remained silent for a few seconds before answering. Not because he had forgotten, but because that period lay too far behind him. He recalled it in a slow voice, without embellishment, then shifted to asking the other person what they were doing, where they were living. The conversation ended more like a meeting between two ordinary people than between a star and an admirer. In September 2018, he collapsed at his home in Florida and was taken to Jupiter Medical Center in critical condition. Despite medical efforts, Burt Reynolds passed away at the age of 82. There was no stage, no film set, only a hospital room where the journey of a man who had devoted nearly his entire life to cinema quietly came to an end. Burt Reynolds moved through cinema through continuous labor rather than through a single defining peak. He once dominated the box office, then slipped from that position, and still returned to the craft when the lights had grown less bright. Each phase left its own layer of trace: the popular star, the actor under doubt, the man rebuilding from the beginning, and finally someone still stepping before the camera even as his body slowed. What remains is not only the films themselves, but the way he existed within them: direct, approachable, carrying a distinctly American masculinity of his era. A journey not perfect, marked by collisions and losses, yet never departing from the work he had chosen.